Business leaders know the future is already here. The economy is shifting. Non-humans are entering the workforce. Nothing feels certain. SHRM understands those evolving challenges, both in the workplace and the wider world. In this podcast, we'll bring together authors, researchers, executives, and non-traditional experts to help you take on the challenges others haven't yet considered. Because you don't need to be a futurist, you need actionable insights now. You need to be a tomorrowist. I'm Jerry Wan. Welcome to Tomorrowist, where we explore the trends shaping the future of work. We're recording today live from San Diego at SHRM 25, the world's largest HR conference. As the workforce becomes more global, multicultural, and linguistically diverse, businesses are gaining incredible opportunities for innovation and connection. This also brings new challenges. Language gaps and cultural misunderstandings can quietly disrupt collaboration, slow productivity, and create invisible barriers to inclusion. But what if technology could help close those gaps? Here to help us explore how AI-driven language tools help teams break through communication barriers is Erika Tedesco, learning leader at CTDI. Erika, welcome to Tomorrowist.
Thank you.
What are some of the more surprising ways that language barriers affect collaboration, productivity, and inclusion in multicultural teams?
One of the things that I think people don't think about as much is the leadership pipeline. So we do a lot of work to create opportunities for frontline employees to know their job, to be really comfortable in their job-specific training. But then what does the pipeline look as they continue to grow with their career? In my organization, about 80% of our frontline employees are not English-speaking employees. But as we look at our leadership level, that inverses. And so 80% are English first and 20% are bilingual. And so what we see is that employees continue to grow with our company, that bilingual and language accessibility is really important to them. And so I think if you don't have a tool or a plan in place, then you really lose a really robust and fruitful pipeline for your leadership.
And I don't want to assume the answer, but I must presume that as the world turned more hybrid and more remote first, and the workforce became more global, as we said at the top, how has that played into this the particular challenges of language being an accessibility issue?
It's interesting. The world keeps getting smaller, right? And we say that, but I think we're really starting to feel that in employers across the country. So I was just talking to someone who is in North Carolina, and the majority of her employees are from Burma, and they speak Burmese in a secondary language that's like, it's not even included in Google Translate at this point. Google can't even translate it. So if we don't have tools, how do we do that?
Right.
And I think that as the world continues to get smaller and people are immigrating and cross-filtering, we need to have something accessible so that we can communicate with one another. And we need to have those tools that can build deeper connection rather than just, back in the olden days when we did word for word translation and that's how we got through things. But now the software is so robust, we can really have deep and meaningful conversations with people.
Sure. I think, you mentioned technology that can translate. Back in the day, it was really about content translation. And I think now, and we'll talk about some of the tools and some of the ways that these tools are evolving, but it also now translates context, right? And so I think if any of our audience members are multilingual, when you're watching something on TV or streaming that the audio language and the subtitles don't match. And it's probably because they hired somebody who understands translation, but sometimes they miss the context, right? And so the larger part of communication is nonverbal and cultural communication, the context. And so tell us about, some of the non-language specific cultural misunderstandings that manifest in the workplace. Sometimes it's directly saying no. Sometimes it's a subtle way of saying no. What are some of the things that you've seen, and how can leaders learn from those?
Yeah. Just last week, I was interviewing candidates for a position that I had at my company. And so it was a promotion level position. So we were talking to people who had already been in the organization. And there was a woman who is only English speaking, but she works with primarily Spanish speaking folks on her line. And the interview question was, tell us about a time when you've had conflict with another coworker. What happened? How did you resolve that conflict? Tell us about it. And her response was, well, I've only had conflict one time. And that one time was when I went to somebody else's station and they had work there and I thought I was being helpful and I got the work down and I took it back to my station. And then all of a sudden I got attacked. And I'm like, attacked? What does that mean? She's like, she just came at me, screaming at me in Spanish. And I don't know Spanish. she attacked me. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. How do you know she was attacking you? If you don't speak Spanish, you don't know what she was saying, right? And she said, no, it was very aggressive. And she just didn't have context to be able to think about that from the other person's perspective. Somebody had just come and gotten something off of their desk and walked away with it, right? Like she didn't know what was happening. And the nonverbal, like the emotive part of the conversation was really what the other person took front and forwards. And that's just something that you have to be open to learning about other cultures, right? It's like you have to understand those nuances so that you don't automatically think, well, I'm being attacked. It's, oh, there's a problem that we need to understand better. And that's when you can go and get your tools, right? Rather than just making that first assumption that something's wrong.
And I think another way that even in the same language, the culture sometimes manifests, and I'm sure many of our HR leaders in the audience have experienced this, is some cultures prioritize I and some cultures prioritize we. And so in the interview process, sometimes we have to coach folks to start using more I and saying, what did you specifically do on a project or a team so that we can evaluate your performance or candidacy a little bit better? What are some other ways that even when we all speak the same language, that sometimes how we use certain words or avoid certain words can create not only not misunderstandings, but missed opportunities for us to shine in that way?
So I've seen some cultural misunderstanding when someone will ask a very specific question. And if the answer is no, the other person won't want to say no. They'll just kind of ignore the question, or they'll equivocate, or they'll go to something else instead of just saying, no, I can't do that, or no, that's not the right path. And then without that explicit no, the other person takes it as, well, you're ignoring me, or I'm getting your implicit approval to go ahead and do that thing, right? And so it increases miscommunication. But it's really a culture thing. So if you're aware of that as a cultural implication to somebody else's background, then you can understand and maybe ask questions or try to get at the answer a different way.
There's no shortage of AI tools improving or perhaps changing the way we do a lot of different tasks, both at work and in a normal life. How are advancements in the AI-driven language tools addressing some of the things that we've talked about of missed opportunities for true contextually resonant cultural understanding, things that get lost in literal translation and in also contextual translation?
Yeah, I think that nuance is so important. And it's one of the things that I struggle with in my organization is even though 80% of my employees are speaking Spanish, there are different versions of
Right.
Spanish, right? And a word that maybe mean one thing for the folks from Cuba is different from the folks from Puerto Rico, is different from Mexico. And personally, the AI tools that I use, I mean, let's talk about ChatGPT, right? Instead of going in and saying, okay, this is my English version, I want you to translate this into Spanish, I can give it the prompt, hey, I am 80% of my employees are Spanish speaking, but 65 of those come from Puerto Rico and 10% come from Cuba and the rest come from Mexico. And I want to create this communication in a way that it resonates with everyone. Or I want to create it specifically for that one employee population so they get a really tight and concise message. So I think we can use those kind of prompts. And then I personally always use project tools in ChatGPT as well and those kind of things so that it continues to learn more about my employees and the population that I'm working with, just so it gets more intelligent so I can be more efficient.
And how have you experienced the other way of communication, or and how are you thinking about incorporating training on using certain tools so that perhaps the broader employee base who also may face certain communication challenges speaking to management can also, have their ideas and their work shared in the best way?
So I'll give you an example. We were doing some safety training, and previously in my organization, the safety training was only in English, and we got terrible results. We, frankly, it was a fire safety training for incidents, and in the organization, we had multiple fire safety incidents, and never once had we adequately, with 100% compliance, managed those. We did training, and we created the policy in English and in Spanish, And then we did training in English and in Spanish. And I use a tool called Synthesia to create video AI, and it translates it really quickly, and it also adds nuance. So I can pick a Puerto Rican accent nuance, or I could do Cuba, or whatever. So it gives me that opportunity to really drill down. And then we did hands-on training, and so we layered all three of those things together, and our compliance rate soared. We're hitting our mark finally, because we didn't just use one tool. We created an environment where our employees could read it, so they had time to process it in their own first language. Then they heard it, they were trained on it in their own first language, and then we got to practice that skill. So that's something that I tell a lot of L&D practitioners is don't just try to use one solution, stack them on top of each other when you really want to get the best results.
And I think this is also a good point that you make too, Erica, of what I'm reading is the technology can only do so much, right? Because you still need the context to understand. So if you don't understand another language and you tell AI to translate it, and you just assume that it's good, you cannot, right? And so you need that quality control of a human being who understands both language and culture and nuance between, like you mentioned, Spanish is spoken in a lot of different cultures, and even the same words can have different tones and meanings. And so, AI is not going to replace all of this, but it's going to help accelerate and to make it, really, I think the goal is inclusivity and accessibility. In your world, in this example, it seems like it led to actual more safety, which is a great thing. But, if folks understand, they may not speak up. Right. And that's another cultural layer of, not wanting to be the squeaky wheel in the system or a disruptor, and you just nod and you move on. I think, for folks for whom English is a second language in this country or another part of the world, you don't ever ask for clarification for everything you don't understand. Beyond implementing some of these language tools, what strategies can leaders implement today to foster linguistic and cultural inclusion within their teams?
Yeah. So we have a lot of technology tools that we're trying and that we're using with our employee base. But the thing that has been the most impactful to our culture is old-fashioned language training. So my employees, we offer an English language class. It's a 15-week class that they can voluntarily participate in and go through that. And when we first did our first cohort of that, several of us leaders decided that we also wanted to learn Spanish. And so it was really this opportunity where they're like, man, learning a language is hard. And we can stand right next to them and say, yeah, learning a language is hard. And, we're the leadership team of the organization, but they see us struggling and they see us going out onto the floor and practicing our language and getting it wrong. And I think that vulnerability has really created trust in our culture because it's not just like, okay, tell Google Translate and let's have this conversation mediated by AI. It's like, I'm making the effort to try to connect with you with where you are. And that has really gone a long way in our organization. So we do all of those things. Again, it's like the tool stacking. Let's do that and let's do old school language at the same time.
What are some of the challenges and opportunities when it comes to asking workforces to leverage AI in learning additional things, right? So there's the day job, there's language inclusion, there's cultural understanding, the nuance, the buy-in process. I think it's an easy business case to make for executives to say, hey, we can get our message down to our workforce and then create more safety, create more understanding. But what about the buy-in for the frontline workers who already feel like they're already doing their jobs and they're being asked to do even more learning?
So what we found is that when we set this succession plan up, when we start talking about development opportunities, what we found is that our employees really want to grow with our company. They want to look for other opportunities. And for a lot of them, a lot of our immigrant community in my organization, they've had really impressive careers in home countries. And then they come to our country and they're doing something different. And they really want to grow with the company. And so as we show them, like, here are the tools that can help you advance your career with us, they're really hungry for them. They really embrace them. And the more we pour into them, just the more we get back.
And I think, the AI and the technology will get even better. There's already technology that exists that will live translate, right? And so, but that will only get better as more data is pulled in. How do you see AI-driven language tools as a competitive advantage, not only in the hiring, but the retention and the promotion of not only international talent, but diverse U.S. talent that may be recent immigrants or in different ways have various entry points of language and understanding?
What we've seen is that our employees are really excited to see communities of people like them. So it's really hard to be the first person and to walk into an organization and you're the one that everybody does have to make accommodations for, right? Like you said, nobody wants to be the squeaky wheel. You want to just be able to come to work and do your job and do great work, and that's the end of it. But so the more we can build community around those folks, the happier they are, the more they're willing to bring in their friends and family to come and refer them to work as well. And then again, we get to see that leadership pipeline of people being promoted in the organization, and other folks see that and want to grow with the company as well. So it's a real pipeline opportunity.
Tell us about sort of the inherent limitations of AI, right? AI cannot be the end all be all. You can't just sprinkle pixie dust on this. And, as we talked about, there needs to be some human training, intervention, and QC, quality control at every process of leveraging AI. What are some limitations there in addition to the cultural nuance, and where do we need to think about being more mindful of the human inclusion in the process?
Yeah. The thing that scares me a lot is the idea of AI hallucinations and some of the data around just what AI is hallucinating. I think it's, personally, the thing that kind of scares me when I think about continuing to use and further use AI, because it is smart and it says things that may not, from a translation perspective, may not be accurate, right? And so that's the concerning thing. I personally always double check my translation, and then I also have a human reviewer as well. So I'll do the AI version, and then I give it to a person to look at,
Right.
and then sometimes we have to do some merging of ideas there. But to me, having that real touch is important. Something else that I always do is maybe I cross-check my sources, right? So I may have a document. If I've got an HR policy, for example, I'll put it into two different softwares and let them both translate it independently and then do any course correction. But if I'm creating a message directly for my employees who don't speak English as their first language, I create that message in that first language using those AI prompts. And so I create it in that first language, and then I translate it back to English, and I can say, hey, is that capturing really what I wanted to say in that message?
I've seen videos of my friends who speak for a living, as I do, and taking their clips, and out comes 5 different language versions of it. The mouth moves right. It's only going to get better. Recently, I just this week or just today, I learned about a friend who lost out on a speaking opportunity to an AI version of something else, right? And so, I think the speed at which we're going to experience these tools is only going to accelerate. Also, the ways that different industries will experience these things, right? And I think as these tools get more widely adopted through our mobile phones, not just a fancy supercomputer, if you will, it will get implemented in just the ways that we talk, right? And so, beyond work, maybe it will make international travel easier, right? As you can communicate with different people, your marketing will be different. If you are a service provider, your customer base becomes instantly more global. What are some of the parts of this sort of evolution that concern you the most in terms of the biggest risk that you see and maybe using too much AI?
Yeah, I think that's just it. Relying too much on the artificial intelligence and forgetting that it's a people. For me, AI is a tool, but at the end of the day, what I'm trying to convey, particularly to my employees, is that I care about you. I want you to be here. I want you to do great work, and together we can do that. And so AI is a tool that helps me communicate with people, but I still want that human connection. And that is what my engagement research tells me that that's going to be the thing that people remember and that keep my employees. So I can use AI for so many different tools, and you're absolutely right. I love it for travel and to be able to connect with people that I wouldn't normally get to. But at the end of the day, like, it's that face-to-face connection that you have with people that is the kind of the spark of life, right? And AI can't replicate that for us.
Depending on what part of the internet you live on, some people believe AI will replace most of our day-to-day tasks. There are other people who are rejecting it and saying, hey, or resisting it rather, and saying, hey, we need to keep things as human as possible for as long as we can. I think the answer will somewhere be in between. The human touch is important, particularly if you are a leader of a organization, or certainly an HR leader, to make sure that you don't, outsource or sort of translate every part of your job, particularly in the communication aspect, to AI, again, there are tangible risks of misinterpreting something or mistranslating something. But also, you don't want to dehumanize that connection that you have at the end of the day. As you mentioned, throughout the conversation, the interesting thing that we'll see is, how does this help people feel more confident, prepared, and ready to take promotion level jobs? The ways that our workforce is now global. On one end of the spectrum, there's that. On the other end of the spectrum, there's more of a return to office policy implementation. And so how does that play in terms of accessibility, in terms of, being more open to a wider workforce? Erika, this has been a fascinating conversation. As we wrap here, what is the one thing that leaders can start to test with or implement or begin to learn so that they can implement some of the things that you've talked about today to be ready for the tomorrow of communication?
I think the low-hanging fruit for leaders is really making sure that their frontline information is translated in a first language that can connect to folks, right? And that's the easiest thing to do. So if I trust the software, if I trust the tools to be able to create documentation and policies and those kind of things, then I create the first layer where I can start building on that, and I can really start building a relationship on top of that using those tools that I trust and understand.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with us today. Erika Tedesco, Learning Leader at CTDI. Thank you for joining us on Tomorrowist.
My pleasure. Thanks, Jerry.
That wraps it up for this week's episode. Join us next time on Tomorrowist. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe to Tomorrowist wherever you get your podcast. We also publish a weekly newsletter with in-depth articles and the latest SHRM research to help keep you in the know about the trends shaping the future of work. You can subscribe and find all of our episodes on our website at shrm.org/tomorrowist. Thanks for listening. And remember, the workplace is changing rapidly. You don't have to be a futurist, be a tomorrowist.
SHRM.